Hey, what's up, everyone? My name's Lionel. I'm your host for LT Productions, and you are watching I Watch You Watch. We are covering The Hunting Wives, currently streaming on Netflix. I appreciate everyone for coming to my channel. Please like this video. You can also subscribe if you are new here and leave your comments below. All right, so let's get into episode 2. Okay, so I did mention them at the end of my video on episode 1. But I wanted to just give some shout out to them again during the beginning of this episode of my recording, just in case you didn't hear it. But shout out to Miss Novelist, May Cobb. This story is based off of her novel that she wrote, and I found out that it's based off of a true story. And also shout out to showrunner Rebecca Perry Cutter. She's the one that wrote the story for this actual production. So just wanted to shout them out one more time. So episode 2, we have basically a more present time flash forward type of scene where a girl and his dad, they are hunting, and they end up I think shooting some type of animal. Anyways, the girl ends up finding this bloody sandal, and we already know what happened, that someone actually got offed. Pow. When they leave the trail, they see that there's a bunch of blood everywhere, and they find the body. The animals had, sorry about this, had eaten the body, or at least part of the body. Now, we go back to 2 weeks ago. It's church day, y'all. So, Sophie and Graham, they visit Jill's church. They have their grand production. Think of it as, if you guys know this church, Joel Osteen's church. He's been in media and all that, so he's quite the, he comes through a lineage of pastors. His father was a pastor, and he was a great man, and all that good stuff. So anyways, so they have this great production. Of course, they're singing, and then the pastor comes out. He greets his wife. Kind of this, how can I say this? It's kind of this first lady type greet, but then also like first lady of politics, you know. It was kind of weird to see. Anyways, so as in a lot of churches, when they know that there are some visitors or new people that have come to the church, they want them to come to the front. Now, Graham and Sophie, they was gonna sit there, but little Jack ended up running up there, so both of them decided to walk up there. So while they were up there showcasing, I think Margot already spotted Sophie, and they waved at each other. You can tell that there's this certain spark that Sophie has for Margot, blah, 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 blah. So she's up there, and Pastor, I don't even know his name, I can't remember. Anyway, starts speaking on David in the Bible. He had just, I'm trying to think of the YouTube-friendly word, he just sent somebody to heaven. So let's just say that much. And he was feeling a lot of guilt from that, or conviction from it. I like to call it conviction. Anyways, it resonated with Sophie, and Sophie began to cry. And she was put on the big screen as she started crying and all that good stuff. All right, so right after service, we see that same man that was at the club the other night. He ended up breaking into Margot's lake house, Margot and Jed's lake house. And then he was quite rude. He just was looking through her stuff, and then ended up urinating in her toilet. I was like, what are you doing that for? Anyways, after church, Sophie meets Star. Star is Abby's mother. You can really see that there is something that's a foundation that's being laid about who Star is versus the others. Meaning, high society, and then there's Star. If you catch my grip, yeah. If you catch what I'm trying to say. She's poor. They got a little money. So Jed, what happens is while Star is talking with Sophie, the other ladies kind of break it up and call Sophie over. Of course, they do this type of Southern Belle type thing. Pull her away, but then you know that there's something underlining as to how they feel about Star, but they don't let on. But they basically said, you know, you come with us and leave this girl alone. So Jed, Margot, and Sophie, they agree. Well, Jed invited Graham and Sophie to come over to have a more intimate setting where we get to know each other more. Now this is so crazy. Now this is later on in this episode. It's quite weird because Sophie and because how Jed ended up coming off to Sophie in this whole situation. Like there's no code of conduct or anything. But anyways, there's some youth church meeting or something, and Pastor Pete, he's over that group. There's supposed to be a Mexico trip planned. Brad says he cannot go because he's going to be in a basketball camp at Baylor. And you'll probably hear me say Baylor like that because of how much it's accented on this show. But somehow he mentions his mom definitely wanted him to stay away from the Mexico trip to do this. And Abby has her smart remarks concerning that. Everyone leaves, and Pastor Pete wants to speak with Abby. And Pastor Pete basically avails himself and says, you know, if there's anything that you want to speak on, you can with him. Well, there is a youth car wash outside. I guess this is right after church service. Jamie, Jamie is the guy that was hitting on Sophie at the bar, who's 18 now. He comes over and wants to service the car. Graham gives him the money and all that good stuff. And he's talking in this code of having all these innuendos and seduction towards Sophie. There, you can tell that there's a secret exchange because she knows what happened, and they both know what happened the other night. Nothing happened. There was just that flirtation and him coming on to her. Graham said, take care of this car, and then Jamie, while looking at Sophie, says, I'll treat your gal real nice. And we know that cars are basically labeled as females. So Jeb and Margot, they're in their car, and they're talking about him running for governor. He finally agrees with Margot that you're right, they're really putting us under the microscope and all that good stuff. Jeb says, Margot says, I don't really come from the best place in life. That's what I was trying to tell you about. Well, Jeb said, I don't think there's anything to worry about, but is there anything recent I need to kind of be alert on? Margot said, well, outside of the women that we have sex with and watch each other have sex with, no. And then Jed says, what about your brother? Wait till a couple more episodes. We're going to really get to know this dude. But anyways, Margot says that I got that handled. Next thing you know, Margot is traveling someplace, and she ends up in a trailer park. And she finds her brother, Kyle. Basically, she says, I don't know what you got going on with this man, but I need you to quiet down and get this out of my life because this man was following me. And Kyle said, I don't know anything about that. She had on this shawl and all that to make herself look like she shouldn't be there, so she isn't spotted or whatever. Next thing you know, Margot gives over $20K to Kyle. And basically, this is for 1 year that you keep your mouth shut about me. Da, 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 da. And you'll also be signing an NDA that my lawyer will send you. Blah, 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 blah. And Kyle said, it don't matter what you do. I don't care how much you have effed, UCK'd, and sucked your way to the top. You'll always be Mandy from Alba, Texas. Then she walks away. While she's leaving, she calls someone and says that we got to talk. Next thing you know, Margot heads over to Callie's home. Once she gets inside, they start kissing and stuff. It's like, oh, so something. So she's not just upset, Callie, that she's being replaced. It's because that she done got into them jeans and Margot got into hers. And she's upset because she's now become not the preferred choice. I said, oh, the plot thickens. So basically she says, we can't do this anymore. Margot tells Callie that. And she's like, what? Did Jeb find out? Like, no. He's going into politics and trying to be governor and all that. And I just really can't have anyone digging around. And I want to protect you and all that stuff. And we just can't do it anymore. But that doesn't mean that I don't want you as friends. We can still be friends. So Callie understood, a little hurt, all that good stuff. So as Margot is leaving Callie's house and walking back to her car, there's a smirk. I said, Lord Jesus, all this manipulation going on. So basically, Margot is trying to clean up everything before anything pops off later on. So at the pastor and wife's house, this is Jill and the pastors, and Brad is there. Everyone's having family dinner, and Jill is really doting and fussing over Brad to eat more chicken. You know, that's high in protein. And Jill starts mentioning Sarah, this new girl. Like, I think you should get interested in her, even though Brad is with Abby right now. So the dad, pastor, ends up saying, let the boy eat his chicken. It just disrupts all that crap that was going on with Jill and his son. You know what Jill reminds me of? This is off of soap opera. Y'all ever watch Bold and Beautiful? She reminds me somewhat of Stephanie Forrester. You know how she used to dote over Ridge? That was the golden child out of everyone, and got into all of his relationships and all that good stuff. A mess. It was quite incestuous a behavior. Not saying that they actually did something, but it was quite cringe. Anyways, Brad says, you know, I'm going to be staying the night with Jamie. He gets up and leaves. Once he leaves, the real pastor, the character, comes out and just says, he gets up and then he says, you know, the chicken is dry. So obviously they don't have a good relationship, and they just keep up appearances for the church. All right, so Sophie and Graham, they go over to Jed and Margot's house, and they just have a little small talk, and then it gets a little bit more personal. Like, how did you guys meet? Sophie asks Jed and Margot. They said, oh, the internet, boring. I said, okay. Graham and Sophie said that they met in college. They were neighbors as far as the dorms were concerned and all that good stuff. Sophie was a former party girl, and Graham has helped her, or has straightened her out. Those are the words. But then Graham says, you know, what I've come to learn about Sophie is that she has a brilliant mind. She's worked very hard and great within the PR political realm, and she's a great mother. It was some things that were, I think, that were really complimentary and really thoughtful, and I think that Sophie really took to heart to what Graham was saying about her at that time. But now she's a great mom and stay-at-home mom and all that good stuff. Then Margot takes Graham to go have a tour of the home, because I think Sophie already had it. So anyways, let the grooming begin. Now, the grooming had already started with Margot, but now it's Jeb's time. Jeb gets this wine that costs like $25, or liquor, whatever it is. That's not $25, $25K. And Sophie was like, that is stupid to buy it for that price. But when you got the coin, shout out to Nene, when you got the coin, you can buy it. So anyways, Jed says, you know, do you want to try it? Sophie says, I can't. And then Jeb was like, sure you can. And it's just a question. You don't have to if you don't want. There is this, I think, reverse psychology when people are trying to bait people and groom people into certain situations and things. Oh, you don't have to do it. They'll dangle the rabbit or the carrot in front of your face, and then act like it's your choice. Yeah, it's my choice, but you've already lured me in and seduced me in some type of way where it's kind of like, I think I do need to do this type of situation. You gotta watch people like that that come into your life to be highly manipulative. Anyways, they start drinking and all that, and then next thing you know, Jeb puts his hand on Sophie's leg, and while that is happening, here comes Margot and Graham, and that basically shocks Sophie, and she ends up spilling the wine that she has, and then she goes into the bathroom. Margot follows in after her and says, you know, I apologize if you were uncomfortable and all that good stuff. That should not have happened. Excuse me. That should not have happened, blah, 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 blah. Where am I at? She says that, you know, her and Jeb have an arrangement. Oh, y'all have an open marriage? Sophie asked. She said no. She basically says, you know, if we see a girl that we like, we go for it. So obviously now, the ante has been upped in this whole situation, and obviously we know where things are going to be headed pretty soon. Abby and Brad, they go on his parents' yacht, boat, whatever you want to call it, and basically have sex. After Graham and Sophie, they leave, blah, 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 blah. Jeb and Margot, they have a talk. And Margot was like, you know, I'm burying all the bodies and you are starting some new stuff. And then she ends up saying, I ended it with Callie. And Jeb was like, well, we can have some discretion about what's going on. Everything doesn't have to end. But even with this whole Callie situation, you have been trying to get out of that situation for a long time. Anyways, because you said that she was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I said, oh. I mean, I don't know if Callie is cuckoo or she's quite, what's the word I want to use? She's been turned out by Miss Margot. And she knows what she's doing. I will say this, I'll wait a little while. I've finished everything as of last night as far as all the episodes. So let's just say that Margot's quite a resourceful lady and she gets what she wants. But I'll say what I want to say a little bit later. Margot says, if you're serious about running, you got to be smart. Okay, this is when Jeb said we could just have discretion about everything. And then they have sex. The next day, Margot goes to the lake house. I think she's bought some groceries or something, and she can tell that someone's been there. She calls Rosa, I believe, who is a house attendant, and asks, has the workman been over there? And she says no. The next thing you know, she texts someone. Of course, I already said it's the next day, and Brad and Abby are in the afterglow of having sex. Abby wants to come to Waco with Brad, meaning when he goes to Baylor. Brad was like, well, you're going to be a junior, and I'm going to be busy with basketball. And of course, if that doesn't sit too well with Abby, I'm like, I think she's 17 years old right now. I think we got to loosen our minds, because whatever the age brackets and limits and stuff like that, and age of consent has to be kind of lifted a little bit with Texas folk. I don't even know the laws there, so let's not get there. But it's just like these teens are quite acting adult-like, in my opinion. Next thing you know, Brad gets a text and he reads it. Well, he finds out he has a text, and he says that it's Mrs. Banks, and he wants him to come by to train the twins today. And of course, Abby said, cool. At Sophie and Graham's home, Sophie is going through the boxes that has not been unpacked as of yet, and we see some paperwork with CPS, Child Protection Services, that was over there. I said, oh, okay, so we're getting someplace. So at this point, Sophie sits on the couch after getting some boxes, and she looks through her phone, and she sees a photo of her and Margot posted on I'm saying Instagram, but whatever, social media, whatever. And immediately she gets horny, and she starts self-pleasuring herself. I said, oh, so we're getting there real fast. Now notice, we don't see any pictures with Jed, but there seems to be quite the turn on to this lady Margot. Callie is also staring at a picture of Margot and Callie, and she looks very upset. You can tell that her makeup's been running and all that good stuff. She understood in front of Margot's face, but at the same time, she's upset that she can't still have her fun time with Callie, or with Margot. Margot did say something like, that we could never have been together anyways. We were just having a good time, blah, 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 as I'm remembering things from that scene. Sophie, while Graham is gone, takes the BMW out. They have another car that's a Tesla. That's more the everyday car. And she goes shopping. And she buys some cowboy boots. And then Sophie spots that one-eyed man from the club. Sophie calls Margot in a panic, like, oh, this guy's following me, blah, 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 blah. Margot did pick up, but the service is bad because she's at the lake house. But she was at least able to say that much. But anyways, she gets in her car, and the one-eyed man approaches the car and all that good stuff, and wants to talk to her. But Sophie doesn't want to talk. He wants more information on the Banks, Jeb and Margot. She says that I don't talk about my friends. Then she realized who this guy is. Not as far as what his name and all that good stuff, but what he's all about. He's some investigator that does his research on political people and all that good stuff. But how she does it is that she gives in and says that she'll have coffee with them, because he said, these people aren't your friends and they got a lot of stuff going on. So she said, okay, let's have a cup of coffee. And then next thing you know, she pulls off in a hurry. At Abby's job, looks like she works for a fast food restaurant. Mrs. Coulson, who is Jeb's ex, and also the mother to the twins. I said, oh, okay. Abby said to the twins, I know you're tired after the basketball practice. And both of the twins looked at each other, what? And Miss Sienna, or Miss Colson, whatever her name is, ended up kind of chuckling a little bit. She said, my boys have never touched a basketball in their life. So, so we didn't really know that those twins were the ex-wives, or I think we knew about the ex-wife in the last episode, I think, but whatever. Brad comes up to the lake house. And she has some questions. Margot has some questions for Brad. Like, were you here at the lake house without me? And he said, no. Like, do you come up here without me? And he says, no. Did you tell anyone about us? He says that Jamie might know. What about Abby? He said, hell no. But she is jealous of you. And why would she be jealous of me? Because you're smoking hot? Brad, tell the truth. Obviously, you done said some stuff or she knows some stuff about you and her. And then he mentions that a lot of times in church, she may have caught me staring at you. And then that's when Margot said, it's got to stop. Jeff's going into the office possibly, or at least running for governor. And we can't be doing this. And then next thing you know, Brad gets upset. It says, I stayed in Maplebrook this summer just for you. Margot was like, oh, that's sweet. Sounds like you are patronizing me in the way that I'm some type of idiot. As you say, I'm sweet for doing that, da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, no, that's not it. And then she turns on what she does best. Her superpower is sex. She said, nothing is written in... he said, I think people are right. I'm starting to believe that the people are right about you. And they say that you are a bitch and more. And possibly people need to know more about you as far as what I know. And that's when she turns on her superpower, which is sex. It says, nothing is really written in stone. But we're going to have to be real careful. He apologizes for even attempting to threaten Margot. And then she says, there could be no evidence. So I'm going to have to swallow as she goes down and does, 69. I'm going to point out 2 clues that really helps with the story later on. Give me a second. Callie, she's at the station, but she's shooting off a target. She's doing target practice also. But she goes into Johnny's office, and the deputy, I forgot his name, is over his shoulder that looked a little bit too close for comfort. Like, what you got going on, Johnny? It looks like all of these folks are just messing around in some type of way. But the deputy could be just doing stuff on his own. I don't know. Anyways, Callie is pressuring Johnny, like, do you have the information? Da-da-da-da-da. And he says, yes, and it's juicy. So Callie looks into this file, and it's about Sophie. And she was like, hot, S-H-I-T. She done got the information that she needed. Sophie drives over to Margot's lake house, and she's trying to find Margot and all that good stuff. She's ringing the doorbell at the main house and then goes up to the lake house. So next thing you know, she looks through the mirror, or the window, I mean. And she is getting oral by Brad. Margot's top is exposed and you can see her breast. And next thing you know, Margot and Sophie lock eyes. Finally, Sophie looks away. And it looks like that's really turning her on. I said, oh my God. So we can't see Brad's face. But in the episodes to come, we find out that she knows. So that was a little bit interesting. But anyways, yeah, that's how the episode ended. That was quite crazy. Now you are with the minor. Let's see what happens after that. 2 clues to what I saw in this episode that's going to help drive the story, or to help us to piece things together. All I'm going to say is boots. If you saw when Abby was being hunted down, there were a particular type of boots that we saw and walking towards Abby. Also, when she says that she cannot leave any evidence, and Margot says it to Brad, I'm going to have to swallow. Something key is going to happen and going to be revealed in the episodes to come. So, yeah. So keep those in mind as we go through this journey. But you can tell that the writer tried to stay very close to the book, because only somebody that is writing could leave these type of clues around to help us as far as discovering what actually happened to Abby and what's going to happen and all that good stuff. So I'm enjoying this. I was trying to get episode 3 out. I don't know if I can, but anyways, my projection is to have out episodes 2 and 3 today, and also Saturday I'm going to have episodes 4, 5, and 6, and then Sunday have episodes 7 and 8, so that we can have it all done by the end of the week. So that's what I want, but we shall see. But I appreciate everyone for coming to my channel. Leave your comments below, please. Let me know how you're enjoying everything that's going on. But it's quite crazy that's what's going on in Maplebrook, Texas. Please like this video, share it, and you can subscribe. Until the next one, peace.